So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the quarterly meeting of the Association of Diagnostics Manufacturers of India via Zoom this time. Thank you very much for joining in such large numbers, even on a weekday. The Zoom meeting itself is a testimony of the fact that all of us are living in a different world today. The world that has the spike proteins of the coronavirus throwing new challenges at us every day. The COVID-19 pandemic had put the technical and scientific abilities of the Indian IVD industry to test. And the industry responded to the need of the hour swiftly, scientifically, strongly, and successfully. The coronavirus has taught us several lessons. A few of them on top of the priority list would be an indisputable need for self-reliance with focus on Make in India and import substitution. And above all, finding pride in what we make locally. Any product that has a label of Made in India should never carry a taboo in our minds from here on. The mandate of ADMI is completely in sync with this philosophy, which says to protect and foster the interests of Indian IVD manufacturers and the products made in India. The last meeting of ADMI was held on the 18th of January at Mumbai, you would recall. So we are all meeting after a gap of about 5 months, and I'll take you through the glimpses of the activities and the initiatives undertaken by the ADMI during this period. As I mentioned a few minutes back, that the focus of ADMI is to make in India and to make India self-reliant as soon as possible. Unfortunately, some of the programs and policies of the government of India also are leaning towards these objectives. One of them being the Public Procurement Order 2017. All of us are aware of the Public Procurement Order, which necessitates that any public procurement made by the government of India up to a value of 50 lakhs must necessarily be done through local manufacturers, provided the products comply with the 3 prerequisites of the public procurement order. Number 1, that the product should have sufficient manufacturing capacity in order to avoid any interruption in supplies. Secondly, there should be enough competition for that product in the market in order to avoid monopolistic situations. And number 3, the product must comply with the requirements of the minimum local content as defined by the Department of Pharma from time to time. ADMI started working on the effective implementation of the public procurement order about 2 years back, exactly in the month of May 2018. You would recall that we had made a list of 136 IVD parameters which had sufficient manufacturing capacity and at least 3 licensed manufacturers in the country. And we sent this list to the Department of Pharma. And a few months later, ADMI got the opportunity to get a strong platform to push for this objective even more strongly when ADMI was made a member of the Forum of Medical Device Associations at the Department of Pharma on the 8th of November 2019. During one of those meetings at the DOP, I asked the Secretary DOP, I said, when the country is in a position to manufacture sufficient quantities and good quality of several IVD products for so many parameters, why is the government still continuing to procure these products from foreign manufacturers? The reply of the Secretary was that we actually are not aware of what all you can manufacture in and in which quantities. So that thought kind of stayed with us in the group. And in the month of March this year, we picked up the threads on this campaign, and we had a 1-month-long campaign on the effective implementation of the public procurement order. You remember that we made an IT tool this time, which had a user manual and which enabled all our members to enter their data related to annual installed capacities in a simple and confidential manner. So we collated all the data and we sent it to the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, specifically to the team of the Honorable Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, and once again to the Department of Pharma. On the 31st of May this year, we received an office memorandum which was sent by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry to the Department of Pharma. And you can see this on the screen. The name of ADMI has been put in the text at several places, and point number 2 and 3 are the ones that summarize this order. It says that it is being stated that a list of 136 in vitro diagnostics parameters with sufficient installed manufacturing capacity was shared by ADMI with Department of Pharmaceuticals on the 31st of May 2018 and requested for public procurement of these products to be made only from local manufacturers of IVD products in India. And point number 3 says that Department of Pharmaceuticals is requested that action in this regard may kindly be intimated to this department at the earliest. Through this circular, we can derive a lot of confidence and believe that the voice of ADMI has been heard by the people who needed to hear it. And we are hopeful that in some times to come, the 136 parameters that we shared with the ministry and with DOP will be procured only from Indian IVD manufacturers, more than 90% of which are members of the Association of Diagnostics Manufacturers of India. These are troubled and challenging times, as a result of which the members of ADMI face several issues and concerns. And the ADMI represented each one of these issues and concerns from its platform to the concerned authorities in the shortest possible time in order to obtain resolutions and solutions. The first representation that we made was on the 22nd of March this year to the Director General ICMR, to the WHO, the Drugs Control General of India, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And the notification, this was against the ICMR notification, who had issued guidelines to private labs, advising them to use commercial kits for real-time PCR for the diagnosis of COVID-19 of only those kits that were US FDA approved or those that had a European CE certification or both. Thus, it precluded the commercialization of any RT-PCR kit for the diagnosis of COVID-19 that did not have these certifications. And this indeed was the case at that point in time when a couple of indigenous manufacturers of India had developed an in-house kit for COVID-19 through RT-PCR, and they got a rude shock when they saw this notification because it precluded them from commercializing their kits. The outcome of this representation was quick and sweet, as one of the Indian manufacturers obtained the ICMR approval and the manufacturing license from the DCGI to manufacture their RT-PCR based kits for the diagnosis of COVID-19 in just a few days after our representation was made. We made the second representation on the 4th of April, highlighting the challenges and concerns that were being faced by the Indian IVD industry, a majority of whom fall under the small and medium enterprise sector or the MSME sector. And these representations were sent one by one to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, to the Finance Minister, and finally to the Prime Minister's office. And the concerns that were highlighted were related to paucity of funds and the anticipated cash flow crunch, import and export woes, and problems related to taxes and statutory requirements in the absence of revenue generation, amongst others like transportation. We also highlighted the measures that the Government of India needed to take to help the small and medium enterprises and the Indian IVD industry tide over safely through the COVID pandemic era. We believe that there were other associations from other industries also who may have escalated the similar concerns and challenges to the finance minister of the country, and the joint effort of the industries did bear fruit on the 13th of May 2020, when the Honorable Finance Minister announced a very lucrative package for the MSME sector, which included an emergency credit of rupees 300,000 crores for the micro, small, and the medium enterprises. And one of the very encouraging announcements that were made on the 13th of May 2020 was that if there is a government tender up to a value of 200 crores, only Indian firms will be permitted to participate in those tenders. I think this is extremely encouraging for our industry and the other Indian companies who have indigenized products. Besides this, there were some rebates and concessions and extensions in the payment of the taxes and other statutory requirements. On the 29th of April, we made a representation to Niti Aayog, the Drug Controller General of India, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and the Department of Biotechnology. Niti Aayog was kept in the loop because Niti Aayog, after a lot of representations from us and other people highlighting the need for COVID positive samples for the development of new tests for the detection of COVID-19 products, and also for the quality release of the batches of products that had already received license from the DCGI. And we were aware that the health ministry must be cautious and wary of handing over positive samples of such a contagious virus to possibly ill-equipped entities. So we made a very responsible request saying that the positive samples should be handed over only to those manufacturers who hold a valid test license or manufacturing license from the DCGI, so that it would be ensured that these companies would have the required infrastructure of biosafety levels to handle this virus safely and appropriately. Niti Aayog soon passed on the mantle of this matter to Department of Biotechnology, to whom also we had sent a representation. A week after that, on the 8th of May, the Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, called a meeting of the industry experts, and ADMI was also invited as an expert on the IVD sector. The DBT gave an update on the NBRIC initiative that they have launched, which is the National Biotech Research Indigenization Consortium, which aims to make India self-sufficient, technology robust, and agile in biopharma manufacturing. I had attended this meeting and had the opportunity of tabling 2 points emphatically on behalf of the association. Number one, once again, I emphasized that the industry needed the availability of known positive samples of COVID-19 in order to move forward with the indigenization. I said there are several companies that hold a manufacturing license from the DCGI. They also have an ICMR approval, but they do not have the confidence to launch their products in the absence of such samples, which will allow them to do a batch-to-batch quality assurance before releasing the products into the market in a safe manner, in a confident manner. And I also mentioned that the Niti Aayog guidelines unfairly excludes the private entities from the access of such samples, and that the guidelines were too complex and tedious for the Indian IVD industry, as many of the manufacturers won't be able to even fill those forms, as they won't be eligible for the same. The conditions are so strong and so many. The second point that I made, which I took a leaf from their own NBRIC initiative, which says that we have to work towards making India self-sufficient and technology robust. So I tabled that the IVD industry needs just top 10 raw materials, a few antigens, a few antibodies, and a few enzymes to reach a self-reliance level of up to 70% in the IVD reagent segment. In case of instruments, of course, the gap is quite large to be bridged yet, But when we talk of the IVD reagents, if we have these top raw materials, we will be able to indigenize because we have the knowledge of biochemistry, of immunology. The infrastructure required is not so capital intensive, and requested the DBT if they could get the support of institutions like the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the ICGEB, the National Institute of Immunology, and if these institutes could help us develop these antibodies, antigens, and enzymes, and collaborate with the industry, our journey towards self-reliance could be made significantly shorter. The response of the Secretary was that the DBT was aware of our concerns and they were committed to making India self-reliant, and they would come forward to help the industry in achieving this objective, and that the Secretary had read the representation made by ADMI, and she assured that her team was working on finding a doable solution to this problem. I would like to touch upon another representation that we had made last year, but some of the work was done this year too on this representation. And just to pique your memory, I would say this was the NBTC notification, the National Blood Transfusion Council's notification, which issued norms for discard of blood and blood components, the unused blood and blood components, the positive sera, on the 27th of February 2019. And the notification said that only government bodies were permitted to collect the unused or contaminated blood components from the licensed blood banks, and private entities like IVD diagnostics kits manufacturers were not permitted to do so. So we made the first representation on the 13th of March 2019, and we highlighted that the industry definitely needed these positive sera and non-negative sera for the manufacturing of positive controls and negative controls, specifically for products like HIV, HBsAg, HCV, syphilis, malaria, and dengue, and which get used in each one of our ELISA kits, CLIA kits, and some of the rapid card tests. And we said that if these sera were not made available to the industry, the entire IVD industry with respect to these products would get paralyzed, and India would move in the opposite direction, becoming increasingly import dependent even for these products. We were then invited by the technical resource group of the NBTC to make a presentation in person to the entire executive committee, the technical executive committee, and we did that on the 30th of April 2019. After that, a number of communications have been exchanged between ADMI and NBTC and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And finally, we received an office memorandum from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare on the 1st of January 2020, which they opened to the public for comments till 31st of January 2020, after which they would hold their TRG meeting again and take a final call. There were a couple of members of the ADMI that were primarily affected by this notification, and based on their needs, we made a new representation before the 31st of January on the need to include raw materials like antigens and antibodies also in the purview of this notification. In other words, to include the IVD, licensed IVD manufacturers, as well as the manufacturers of raw materials like antigens and antibodies, since these raw materials are used in the manufacturing of IVD reagents and kits and therefore are an integral part of the ecosystem. So this was the office memorandum, which we received from Dr. Shobhini Rajan, who is the director of NBTC, and they opened it for public comments till 31st of January 2020. And if you see, this is the representation that we made. I just want to explain that the first 3 lines are already there in the office memorandum. And we've only asked them to add the last line. So some of you who've been concerned about this notification, it says that the TTI seroreactive blood bags shall only be used, issued to indigenous manufacturers with valid manufacturing license from state licensing authorities and central licensing authorities. So full stop. This is where the actual OM ends, that the licensed manufacturers, either from state licensing authority or central licensing authorities, would be permitted to obtain unused positive blood products from licensed blood banks, of course, with some conditions and some necessary documents and records that must be maintained by the company that receives such material. Now, the last line is what we have asked them to add is, as well as to indigenous manufacturers of diagnostics raw materials like antigens and antibodies. So now we are waiting for the response and the final verdict of the technical resource group on this matter, but half the job on this is already achieved. On the 20th of May, we made another representation, once again in the interests of the Indian manufacturer working in India. As some of us in the IVD industry of India get saddled by restrictive clauses like a necessary need for US FDA approval or a European CE certificate. And in this case, it was a restrictive clause related to the WHO find evaluation report being a prerequisite for even becoming eligible to bid for the tender in India. We made the fifth representation on the 20th of May, as we were hit by a very grave and debilitating concern on the 4th of April 2020, when there was a notification from the DGFT that said amendment in export policy of diagnostics kits and reagents falling under HS code 3822 to be immediately banned from exports. This was a sudden and immediate concern for a number of our members, since some of them had millions of dollars worth of shipments being held at the ports, losing precious shelf life every day. Looking at the seriousness and the urgency of the problem that we had at hand, we made 5 consecutive representations to the DGFT, to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and finally to the Prime Minister's office on the 7th May, the 7th April, the 9th April, 18th April, 6th May, 23rd May. Every other day, we were sending a representation to the concerned authorities. The outcome of this was that on the 7th of June, we received a response from the DGFT making a reference to the grievance registration that we'd made at the Prime Minister's office. And this is the response that we got from DGFT. And it said, in a sense, that the matter that we had presented to them was under consideration with DGFT and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and that the concerned ministries had noted the concerns of ADMI adequately, and they would soon be communicating to us on the way forward on this matter. And they asked us to follow a procedure in the meantime, which was also elaborated in the communication that we received from them. We were happy to receive this communication, because it's not easy to get a response from the ministries and the government of India, and such a long response and an official response in the form of an OM, actually. But we didn't have to wait too long. And just 2 days later, on the 10th of June, which is just 2 days back, we received a very clear circular from the DGFT saying that all diagnostics kits, reagents, instruments, apparatus falling under the cited HS codes in the notification were exportable freely and immediately. And that brought a lot of relief, I think, to a number of members of the ADMI. And of course, the notification did have some exceptions, which listed COVID-19 related kits, reagents, instruments, apparatus, and some raw materials, which is understandable, because when we first made the representation against the export ban, ADMI itself mentioned in the representation that we are unable to understand why routine products like clinical chemistry, hematology, or urine strips, which fall under HS code 3822, have been banned from exports. And we all can understand as responsible members of the association and citizens of the country that if you were banning COVID-19 related products, we would be with you, and we are there to collaborate with the government of India in the fight against COVID-19. These COVID-19 related products should definitely be made available to the citizens of India first before exporting. Because a lot of companies of viral transport media and some other products were preferring to export their products because they get a better realization for their products in the foreign markets. But now with this notification, India would get the first opportunity to make use of COVID-19 related kits, reagents, instruments, and apparatus so that we become self-reliant and we don't have a paucity of these important reagents and kits which are used in the diagnosis or serosurveillance of the deadly coronavirus. In the interim period, it took us about 2 months to get this circular out from the DGFT after they received a nudge from the PMO. But even in the interim period, the ADMI Management Committee was coordinating with several members of ADMI, trying to help and handhold during the process of understanding the circulars that were being received from DGFT, helping other members upload forms which were complex and not easily comprehensible. But the ADMI MC came forward and kept the ball rolling. And therefore, it took us 2 months, but we finally succeeded as an association in this important matter. Abhinav touched upon this in his opening remarks, and I'm very happy to share that the membership count of ADMI has reached 60 now, and we have more than doubled in 3 years, and we have grown at a CAGR of more than 25%. Now, with a membership count of 60, we can safely estimate that more than 95% of the Indian IVD manufacturers are now members of the Association of Diagnostics Manufacturers of India, and they are lending strength to the voice of the IVD industry. I take this opportunity to also welcome the new members who have joined our association. Mylab, of course, had joined earlier, and we have High Media who's joined us today, and we have Biosense Technologies and Mall Bio who have joined us today. So welcome all the new members to ADMI. We are very happy to have you as members, and we look forward to your insights and your contributions to make this association even greater and more effective and efficient in the times to come. So this was the update till the last 2 days, if I may say. And I hope that we will meet in person the next time in happier and healthier times. As they say, tough times don't last, tough people do. So thank you very much for your attention. And if I may say, can I offer you a virtual cup of tea? As we used to have a tea break during our ADMI meetings, I can only offer you a virtual cup of tea, which means that if you just want to get up for 2 minutes and fill up your cups of tea or mugs of coffee and have them ready with you when you listen to the next session, which is actually the highlight of the ADMI meeting today, and the reason why we really wanted to go in for a Zoom meeting. As you all know from the agenda, and as Abhinav had shared, we're going to have a keynote address on COVID-19 and clinical labs, impact and the future, from none other than Dr. Arvind Lal, who is the managing director of Dr. Lal PathLabs, and he received his Padma Shri in the year 2009. Thank you very much. Warm welcome to the Association of Diagnostics Manufacturers of India. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Arvind Lal, Managing Director of Dr. Lal's PathLabs, joins us today with his session entitled COVID-19 and Clinical Labs, impact, and the future. But as no introduction from me could be befitting of the man himself, let's take a quick look and perhaps catch a glimpse of what's been nothing short of a stellar career and journey.
Okay, I'll be playing the video.
Thanks, everyone.
Which we've made with a lot of love for you, Dr. Lal.
You didn't have to do all that. This is too much. Thanks, Abhinav.
Yeah, just give me a minute. Okay, now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Brigadier Arvind Lal is a pioneer in bringing laboratory services in India at par with the Western world. He is an alumnus of the Armed Forces Medical College, AFMC Pune, having received his graduate and postgraduate medical degrees from the prestigious institute. In 1977, Brigadier Lal took charge of Dr. Lal PathLabs, the medical diagnostics laboratory founded in 1949 by his late father. Under his expert guidance and leadership, Dr. Lal PathLabs has become one of the most reputed laboratories in Asia, having to its credit a record of 32 labs accredited from the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories. He brought international recognition to the Indian healthcare industry in the form of accreditations from the College of American Pathologists. Currently, they operate nearly 200 labs, including Asia's biggest lab at Rohini, New Delhi, with 2,600 collection centers and pickup samples from another 6,400 medical establishments all over India. The lab tests over 70,000 patients every day, and in 2018, they tested over 18 million patients. Dr. Lal has revolutionized laboratory medicine by introducing the maximum number of new tests, instruments, and ICT systems in India. His R&D unit has done India proud by developing the latest tests in molecular diagnostics, cytogenetics, and many more. The aim of the R&D division is to provide highly specialized tests at low costs to the weaker sections of society. Dr. Lal is a member of many expert and advisory bodies constituted by the central and state governments. Awarded with the Padma Shri in 2009, Dr. Lal is also the first civilian doctor to be granted an honorary brigadier's rank in Armed Forces Medical Services, and he was convened this title in the year 2009. In 2015, under his leadership, his company had one of the most successful IPOs in recent history of the National Stock Exchange. In 2016, All India Management Association conferred Dr. Lal the Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And in 2017, he was conferred with the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Federation of Indian Chambers and Commerce, or FICCI. In 2018, Dr. Lal published his first book called Corporate Yogi, My Journey as a Spiritual Seeker and an Accidental Entrepreneur. In 2019, Dr. Lal was bestowed a unique honor by the Armed Forces Medical College, Pune, by being inducted in the prestigious Hall of Fame. He was also bestowed the honorary degree of Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, honoris causa by the Ryan University. And today, ADMI is delighted to welcome Brigadier Dr. Arvind Lal, Padma Shri.
So thank you, folks. Tell me, you would like me to start?
Yes, sir. It's indeed an honor for each one of us to hear you speak. So over to you, sir. We are all ears.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to address the ADMI Quarterly Meeting today. And for this, I'm really honored, and I would like to thank ADMI's leadership of Dr. Veena, the President, the Secretary, Mr. Abhinav Thakur, the Vice President, Mr. Nital Patel, and Dr. D.K. Joshi, the immediate past President. Once again, thanks very much for inviting me to this gathering. Indian diagnostic manufacturers have assumed a significant role in the Indian healthcare industry, And ADMI, being the voice of the Indian diagnostics manufacturers, is a very important body. You have made India really proud by coming to the rescue of all diagnostic labs at this critical time. It is phenomenal that in such a short span of time, 131 COVID testing kits were approved by ICMR for commercial production, and further 77 of these kits, which include 16 RT-PCR, 31 RNA extraction kits, and 33 viral transport media kits were developed locally. These indigenous products are cheaper, have better availability, and decrease our dependence on imports, read in my language as China. Today's 70% of clinical decisions are based on lab tests, and hence diagnosis has become the bedrock of medical care. Rapid advancements in healthcare have accentuated the preference for diagnostic tests for risk identification, prevention, monitoring, and evidence-based treatment. The Indian laboratory diagnostics industry is estimated at rupees 75,000 crores, is highly fragmented and dominated by largely unorganized players. About 1 lakh diagnostic labs are existing in the country, and most of them you can brand as testing shops, and they are not actually authentic pathology testing laboratories. Out of these, standalone labs constitute about 48% of the market, and hospital labs make up for about 37%, and diagnostic chains like ours account for the remaining 15%. Aggregation and consolidation of the standalone labs with organized players is being witnessed more often now. The organized sector labs are known for the quality and accreditation, which is crucial, as only 1% of the total labs in India are accredited by NABL, meaning which just about 1,000 labs are, or 1,000 plus are accredited out of the 1 lakh such labs. Private diagnostic chains have revolutionized the availability of advanced diagnostic tests in India. But just like all other health facilities and services, access to quality diagnostic tests is not equitable across the country. Due to high concentration of labs in Tier 1 cities, there exist large gaps in access to affordable and reliable diagnostic tests in people living in smaller cities and rural areas. The government has rolled out free diagnostics initiative. This is a new initiative, and several targeted national health programs to improve access to essential diagnostic tests for high incidence diseases and conditions. However, we need more strategic and sustained efforts to bridge this gap. Early diagnosis can significantly reduce morbidity and mortality associated with India's dual burden of diseases, which is both communicable, as we are facing now, and non-communicable, which is killing 65% of us. Over the past few decades, various innovations on the supply side, improving sensitivity of rapid diagnostic kits, as we call them, RDTs, development of point-of-care devices, digitally connected devices, and user-friendliness have enabled higher penetration of essential diagnostic tests in underserved areas. The growing prevalence of diseases and the growing demand for in vitro diagnostic tests are likely to be major drivers for the global clinical laboratory test market. But COVID-19 pandemic has slowed the activities in the short to mid-term and present unique challenges for continuing operations. In spite of significant drop in patient footfalls due to the lockdown and no elective surgeries, labs faced the need to continue operations and invest in additional materials, equipment, and manpower to ensure preparedness for COVID-19. Diagnostic labs reported up to 80% fall in patient visits and revenue. A detailed assessment by FICCI and Ernst & Young on impact of COVID-19 on the healthcare sector estimated that the lockdown is likely to result in operating losses to the tune of up till 2,200 crores in this quarter for diagnostic test labs. The crisis has left all clinical labs grappling with an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. The situation has particularly hit the small standalone labs very hard, forcing many of them to shut down in absence of any additional financial support. The global health emergency once again emphasized that critical role of diagnostics in preventing the spread of outbreaks. India's three-tier approach, which is 3T, consisting of tracing, testing, and tracking, coupled with cluster containment strategy, provided us with an initial upper hand against the COVID-19. There are currently two broad types of testing for the virus that detects viral RNA, that is RT-PCR, and serological tests that detect the host's response to the virus. RT-PCR remains the backbone of testing for the virus. Serological tests are more relevant for epidemiological studies and to guide policy for future preparedness. India started with conservative testing strategy using only a network of government labs overseen by ICMR and National Institute of Virology in Pune. With increase in number of cases and progression of the outbreak, the testing strategy has been periodically revised, and on 21st March, private NABL accredited labs were allowed to test for COVID-19 following an approval from ICMR. And out here, there are 1,000 labs, as I told you, for which are accredited by ICMR, by NABL, but only those labs which had experience of testing RNA viruses like HCV and swine flu, HIV, and this was in the scope of their NABL accreditation, were selected. And now NABL has done a marvelous job by doing it online. More than 200 private labs have been approved by ICMR across the country to test for COVID-19. This has been a major driver in increasing the number of tests conducted to the current 1.4 lakh tests per day from less than 20,000 per day 2 months back. We crossed 50 lakh RT-PCR tests for COVID-19 on 9th June, but there still exists concerns over the lack of tests preventing patients with symptoms from being diagnosed. In early March, WHO also emphasized on mass testing, and Dr. Tedros, the WHO Director General, that all nations should test to combat the virus, and countries failing to do so would be fighting, quote unquote, a fire blindfolded. That's what he said. Mass testing has proven to be key differentiators in South Korea's successful response to COVID-19. I would like to draw your attention to the High Court's order yesterday that the testing in fact has gone down in Delhi, and they are asking private labs to give affidavits to iron out all the difficulties. At this stage, where India is at the verge of touching 3 lakh COVID cases, there is a need for expansion of testing strategy to include testing of all patients to be admitted for an operation or a procedure in any hospital and all individuals with influenza-like illnesses. This can further aid containment of the outbreak and reducing the risk of other patients and healthcare workers in a hospital from cross-infection due to late discovery of being a COVID positive case. In the initial phases of testing, labs faced several expected and unexpected bottlenecks. On the supply side, due to a sudden surge of demand for COVID-19 diagnostic kits or tests, availability of test kits and consumables with regular suppliers fell severely short. Difficulty in logistics and on the ground movement of supplies from producers to vendors to labs was further impacted with the strict restrictions under the lockdown. Prices of consumables are fluctuating almost on a daily basis. Market volatility also led to suppliers preferring to work on advance or immediate payment terms, which disrupted the cash cycle to some extent. Diagnostic labs, which employ around 8 lakh people, grappled with concerns over safety of their staff and handling samples for testing, as availability of PPEs were severely short. On another front, labs had to comply with varied government requirements. The challenges ranged from ambiguities in testing methodology to pricing of tests, even when ICMR had capped the prices, to working in an environment of mistrust. These unnecessarily led to duplication of efforts, wastage of already limited resources, additional cost burden, delaying testing, and deviation from the standard practices that have been developed by ICMR through extensive consultation with experts. Reporting formats also varied across states. Several mandatory procedures were introduced suddenly such as registration of each phlebotomist or sample collector with the approval of the district magistrate or district commissioner, and compulsorily use of RT-PCR app. And this continues till date, which is creating a difficult environment for labs to operate. By the way, the Gangaram Hospital was issued an FIR for not using this RT-PCR application on the cell phone. That's how it came about. Now that the lockdown is being lifted and India implements what is now known as Unlock 1.0, testing, contact tracing, and isolation of positive cases is the only way forward for us. ICMR's own analysis of testing data revealed that mode of transmission is not known for majority of cases. A large number of people tested positive were asymptomatic, and our testing to positive ratio is also increasing. And I would like to put on record here that ICMR in newspapers today has again announced that there is no community transmission so far. So we can safely say that we need to increase testing across the country. The scale of testing should be proportionate to the extent of the outbreak, derived from a city's total number of positive cases, testing to positive ratio, fatality rate, and population makeup. A bulk of testing volumes should comprise of individuals in hotspots, contacts of COVID positive patients, vulnerable populations such as the elderly or immunocompromised individuals, and healthcare workers. Special consideration must also be given to testing migrant workers, poor and marginalized communities, and randomly selected asymptomatic people. Also, as business restart operations, a strategy for pool testing of workers before rejoining work will be crucial to prevent further contagion. Antibody-based serological tests also become important as the economic activities resume to understand the proportion of population exposed to COVID infection and accordingly implement public health interventions for prevention of and control of the outbreak. Above all, we need to make sure people living in smaller cities and rural areas have access to COVID testing. Progress is being made to expand the network of labs as NABL is providing online accreditation to bring on board more labs for testing. And I must add here, hats off to NABL. Majority of the labs, I would say 80% of the labs have been accredited online after the ICMR gave permission to the initial 18 or 20 labs. So really hats off to them. Going forward, two aspects will define India's success in testing. Number one, strengthening laboratory capabilities grounded in a strong health system. And number two, seamless availability of test kits and other supplies, and that's where you all come in. Both these aspects also present unique opportunities for us to build upon. Recent announcements under the Government of India's Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan highlighted reforms and enablers across 7 sectors, including health. It states that public expenditure on health will be increased by investing in grassroots health institutions and ramping up health and wellness centers in rural and urban areas, setting up of infectious diseases hospital blocks in all districts, and strengthening of lab network and surveillance by integrated public health labs in all districts and block level labs and public health units to manage pandemics. To operationalize the envisioned hub and spoke public health lab network, the government must consider collaborating with existing private lab chains in the public-private partnership mode, PPP. The private sector has transformed the diagnostics ecosystem into a service industry, bringing in additional benefits of wide test menu, delivery model innovation, IT integration, and generating skill-based employment. This will provide the public health lab services with such much needed operational efficiency, quality standards, and can be operationalized quickly. I must add again for the record that it is we people in the lab industry who brought accreditation for the first time into India. It is not the hospitals. So we were the first ones. I think it started off with ISO and then NABL and then CAP, and the hospitals were accredited about 6 years later. So we are the ones who actually brought quality to India. PPPs and diagnostics have been successful in several states. In fact, our own Dr. Lal PathLabs is accredited to having the first PPP in the field of laboratory testing with the government of Tripura since 2004. Labs run under PPP have been able to bring down the cost per test, simplify logistics, reduce errors, and increase utilization of public health testing services. This will further help with the implementation of free essential diagnostics initiative to address the high out-of-pocket expenditure on diagnostics, accounting for about 10% of all out-pocket expenditure on health. We can also leverage Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan to promote manufacturing of IVDs to meet not only supply needs of the lab network to be created, but also to become a hub for supplies for the world. I wish you all, now go to the second phase, and that is create markets and where China was. I wish that all of you now capture those markets. Taking a cue from ICMR detecting that antibody kits reported from China were faulty, Indian manufacturers can use this chance to produce antibody test kits for India as well as for exporting these kits to other countries, what I just said earlier. I believe it is time we harness the Indian potential of manufacturing and low-cost, high-value innovations, and I'm sure we can do it. The COVID crisis is also a driver to strengthen the diagnostics value chain with strategic interventions, fostering better relations among stakeholders and optimizing cost. Summing up, I want to say that we must make sure that the diagnostics industry emerges stronger from this pandemic. Even as we continue to fight COVID, our commitment to advancements in diagnostics should further accentuate. Our concerted efforts can make this possible, and there cannot be a better time to prove this right. Given the right impetus, the industry can play an important role in the health and economic well-being of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an insightful session. And it's such a pleasure for each one of us to hear you speak. You won't believe it, what an honor it is for us. And I request Abhinav to please moderate the question answer session now, because I'm sure our members have a lot of questions to ask Dr. Arvind.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Good. So we will take up some questions from the members, and I'll just unmute the participants because I've not received any question in the chat. So I'll unmute the participants. Okay. So anybody wants to questions, and if you have noise, I would request you all to put your mute. We can hear Dr. Lal and question clearly.
કાકા ખબર જ છે તમે પડકે બેઠા છો તમે હું એમ પૂછવાનું કહો છો એ મને ખબર છે નહીં ભરીને લઈ લેવા નથી કહેતો કાકા હું એમ કહું છું એની સિવાયની જગ્યા નીકળો ત્યાંના ભાગ પાડવે એમ કોણ ના પાડે.
I would request any of our members, if you have questions, this is one in a lifetime opportunity. We have got Dr. Lal with us. Any questions? Please go ahead. So I have a question, Dr. Lal, about the workload, as the sample workload you mentioned has come down by almost 80%. So when do you see this sample workload coming back to the before COVID numbers, and what is going to happen to the unorganized labs because they don't have the financial strength? So is it labs are going to disappear also?
Yeah, so we are already seeing that the after effects of lockdown are getting sorted out. We are seeing now patients returning back, and with this unlock 1.0, we hope that in about 3 to 4 months from now, things become normal. But initially, as you heard me, it was really bad, really sad. Maybe it was because of the lockdown, people were not able to come. And I don't know what people were doing. Our patients, with renal failures and kidney transplants and cancer patients, etc., it was really hard on them. Regarding your second question about, the smaller labs, are kingpins in their own small domain. So what I would, suggest to them is that they should not get carried away by, all these kind of, it's like in old, days when we used to be living in a small village or a small town, there used to be, the doctors who were available there. So be it Dr. Lal's PathLab or any other one, but the smaller labs have their own niche market, and they may not have that kind of scaling up, but nobody can actually take away their business, so they need not really worry.
Okay, good. So the good news is at least in the next 3 to 4 months, the sample load should come back to the normal before COVID.
Hopefully.
Okay. So
I have a question.
I have a question.
Okay, please go ahead.
So we have a question coming in, which is, what is Dr. Lal's opinion on the current situation of the pandemic in India, and what number does he see in India? I think what he means is what numbers do you see of COVID patients coming in, and where does he see falling numbers, or what can lead to falling numbers? I think this is the question.
Well, the numbers in India are only increasing, and they're nowhere near the American number. But our, numbers are about, I think, 1 lakh and about 7,000 or 8,000 dead. So the good thing I can tell you, though it's not a nice way of putting it, that the mortality rate in India is comparatively low. So what has caused that? Is it our BCG vaccination, or is it some inherent quality of Indians who have come across so many viruses, measles, smallpox, etc.? So I don't know the answer. Nobody would know that answer. But there is something which India has done right, and that was that when we alerted ourselves and we came up with our lockdown strategy, etc. initially. So that has helped us. What has not helped us is that I still feel that testing is still on a low scale. It can be ramped up. Dr. Balram Bhargav, the ICMR chairman, has already said that we would be testing. We are already testing 1.5 lakhs, as I just told you. So I think the next target should be about 3 lakhs, and we are going to ramp up to about 5 lakhs ultimately. So that is the way I look at it.
Dr. Lal, I have one question related to these RT-PCR tests. What is your experience about sensitivity and specificity of these tests?
So the sensitivity and specificity are more than 95%. And as far as I understand testing, this is still the gold standard, irrespective of what you have read, what people may say. And there are no false positives in this test, I can assure you. And the false negatives are there only because of bad sampling, because it's a subjective kind of a thing. Objective, it's not objective. People can go and take from the wrong place, etc. Then the most commonly heard against problem for private players now is that, well, you tested positive and we tested after a few days, it became negative. And now, how do you explain that? So my first reaction to them is that, are you at least an NABL accredited lab? The answer is no. And I again would like to, shift all of you that none of the government labs which are competing with us are NABL accredited. Yes, they have been given permission by ICMR, but it is not the same thing. Second thing is that next day when you are, after 3 days, when they say, no, this patient, tested positive at Dr. Lal's, but we tested it negative, it is bound to be, because the viral load is coming down from the nasopharynx and from the pharynx every day. Third thing is that the guy who has taken the sample is not the same guy. So there is, kind of a difference in that. The fourth thing is that, well, we are doing it from a kit kind of a method. And in all the government labs, at least to my knowledge, they were using the RT-PCR probes and primers. So the methodology is also different. So the two cannot match. But the basic thing which I want to put on record is that after 3 or 4 days, the whole thing has changed. So this is the something, when you get bouquets, you also get a lot of brickbats, and also many people in the government and in the general public, there is a mutual mistrust against the lab people, the private people, and they really think that for us to increase the numbers in private hospitals, we are actually making them positive, which is absolutely not the case. That's all I would like.
One more supplementary question. What is your opinion vis-a-vis the day of infection and picking it up by RT-PCR?
See, the ideal situation is 0 to 14 days. And somewhere in between, on the, say, 7 to 10 day onwards, the IgM also starts coming up, which is there till about 21st day. And then on the 14th day onward, the IgG starts picking up, which is supposed to be, positive for a very long time. So IgG testing and the IgM testing, the antibody testing now, which will start, I think, hopefully in large numbers in India. So you will all see the results of that. I'm quite hopeful that we will be able to contain this menace now.
Thank you.
Right, sir. This is Dr. Gautam from Mylab. I have a question over here. So we're just looking at a hypothetical situation, say 6 months down the line. So as a lab, do you think the pre-operative or the pre-admission testing of all patients for COVID-19 will become a kind of routine process?
Come again, Dr. Gautam, but once again, please, last part, what were you saying, that in 6 months' time?
Considering that the pandemic situation is over in 6 months' time, do you think a pre-operative testing of all admission patients supposed to be admitted, labs and hospitals would do a COVID-19 testing for all patients in that case? That's a hypothetical situation.
Well, as they say, what is good enough for the goose is good enough for the gander. And right now, if we are testing all pre-operative patients admitted to hospital with non-COVID infections for COVID-19, so it is mandatory. I think in 6 months' time, things are not going to change. In fact, if you have read the news report, I think today or yesterday, that second wave has already hit America. So we don't know when the second wave will hit India, but right now we are still going through the first, hit. And judging from our experience from the 1918, 1920 Spanish flu days, well, a second wave is absolutely to be expected. We should be ready for it. And, and what you are, I hope I've answered your question. Answer is yes.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.
So we have another question come in that also if industry come out with ELISA IgG IgM kit, how much is it useful in diagnostic labs? Does this play a key role of plasma therapy as it's a quantitative test?
Yep. So I think the best test which we can offer after the initial peak is over is the IgG quantitative test, or what we call titer, a high titer. Now, as a doctor, I would love to see an IgM negative individual, but an IgG which is positive, and it should be so much positive that he himself is being capable of becoming a plasma donor. That's what I would love to see.
And we have another question come in. Dr. Lal, please comment on the virus losing its potency to spread after 21 days if living in a person.
I lost you a little bit. The virus losing its
Potency to spread after 21 days, living if the virus is in the person. I think that's the question.
I'm losing you, but I get the question. The answer is that after 14 to 21 days, the test RT-PCR test may be positive, but you may be just picking up the remnants of the RNA which have disintegrated and still inside the throat or the nasal swab. So what I expect is that after 21 days, an RT-PCR test should be negative. But in one odd case, when it is positive, I explained to you how it can be positive.
Okay. Then we have another one. Wanted to understand the testing ratio versus positive ratio on PCR. So out of the total test, what they mean is how many tests are positive?
See, if it was, slightly the testing criteria or the people whom you can test was slightly wider, the positivity rate actually would drop. So many more, people who thought or ILI influenza-like illness they have, and which may not be, COVID-19. So the simple answer to this question is that testing criteria is very restricted. So you are going after people who are supposed to have this illness, and it is no rocket science that yes, we are finding more positives in this. So the government or the people should not be afraid of this. The keeping our, the cluster region and the Dharwi Chaul kind of a scenario, these, slums are there in every kind of a, metro city. So it is not surprising at all that it has, caught on like fire there. But the government has to, do something about it. I mean, it's just not, it's not a medical problem. It's a socio-economic problem also.
Right. So there is another question now. How good is the true NAT or LAMP technology for COVID testing? Is the sensitivity and specificity comparable to RT-PCR?
Well, RT-PCR still is gold standard. But the other two are absolutely okay, and even the gene expert is perfect. So it depends upon the size of the lab, and more importantly, whether the ICMR will give you permission to, if you are a small lab, with these smaller instruments. But they are absolutely okay. From my side, it's a green signal.
Good, good. Then there's another question come up. Would antigen testing on the rapid platform hold any diagnostic value? If yes, what would be, I think, be the choice, ideal choice of sample?
जिस किस्म में पहले आईसी जो रिपोर्ट है आपका उसमें आप क्लियरली क्योंकि हमारे पास वो रिपोर्ट नहीं है और उनको जो क्लेरिफिकेशन देना वो दे दो
You ask them to mute their
मैं टाइप करूँ चाहूँ पूरे सर बॉस ने हमारा लेटर लिखा है मैं आपको करता हूँ जो है मेन वही है और आयुषी
Okay, now is a good time.
Yeah. So your question was about antigen testing. Antigen testing is a beautiful test. And since I was the first one practically in the country to introduce HBsAg, I have a lot of passion for antigen tests. So it is something which is, it's a dream test. You don't have to go so sophisticated as RT-PCR. It is much better than an IgM being positive in serology when people, mistake it for a diagnostic test. So an antigen test is my wish list. I hope it comes sooner than later.
Okay. Then the COVID tests are being done with the COVID suspected cases or, with the COVID patients. What would be the other test which would also play an important role other than the COVID test? For example, D-dimer or blood gas.
Yeah. So I think the most important test which I have picked up is, and firstly, the people who are getting COVID-19 positivity on a test. First of all, it is our duty and your duty also to assure them that 85% or 90% time they will improve at home only. There's nothing else to be done. It will pass off like a normal influenza test or influenza illness. Even when they are admitted, it is hardly, in decimal percentages that one would require oxygen or, ventilator. Having said that, the tests which come in handy are D-dimer and all the other, coagulation kind of tests. You can also have the science for inflammation, which is IL-6. We are in fact doing a interleukin-6 trial for, a company. And anything which goes or, towards this, the inflammatory response. So these are tested, your
CRP test.
Yeah, rapid test, not so much, but the oximeter.
Yeah, C-reactive protein.
C-reactive protein is very, very important here. C-reactive protein is something which I think is a dream test. And of course, we were the ones who brought it into India, and even the HSCRP. So I would say, but these are all tests which can be done after the first diagnostic test is over, after you go to keep the person alive. And these are the tests which you'll be carrying out every day, when he's admitted in the hospital.
Okay.
Liver function test, kidney function test. I believe kidneys are failing. The hearts are showing, problems. And so even your troponin I, troponin T is useful there.
Okay, good. And what about the G6PD-H because of the anti-malarials being given? Is that also going to be an important test?
There is a slight controversy regarding using hydroxyquinine, in a diagnosed case. Again, since I am not a treating doctor, but what I have picked up is that people who are in, those high fidelity kind of situations, that, I'm a person who's taking the throat swabs, etc. I'm also the person who's doing the test in the lab. I can be put on prophylactic HCQ. That is okay. But again, it is our duty to explain to them that do not take it as a prophylactic measure. What used to happen, your friend is coming from America and he started on hydroxyquinine, before he started, and just take, once in a day or etc. It is not to be done. Second thing, which as a doctor, I'm telling you, this increases the QT interval on the ECG. So before you put anybody on HCQ, you must get his ECG done and see that the QT intervals are all normal, because later on you will not know what has happened. That's what I would like to say.
Good. And coming in the future, as COVID is estimated, it's not going to go away in the short run or in the long run also. So what would you see as a percentage? There are certain estimates that 50% of the workload is going to become COVID testing in labs. Do you see COVID testing becoming a big percentage of the
last such tests which came into our fold in chronologically were HIV, and then the swine flu test which came in 2009. The other ones, which MERS, etc., they hope, Ebola, they did not come to India. So my, reading about this disease is that it is not going to go away in a hurry, that's for sure. It is going to linger on. You and I are going to form antibodies at some point of time. Some point of time we might be, even given the vaccine, which we are all hearing about. And the fastest vaccine, is going to come out maybe in October, November from Serum Research Institute of India, Oxford vaccine. That is one of the front runners. 10 such vaccines are, on a very high kind of a track, fast track.